meetings pursuant to the executive order dated March 20th, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. I am formally calling it to order. And the first item we want to address is to formally approve our December 20th, 2020 agenda. Are there any edits or deletions that anyone would like to make? Dr. Craighead.
I would like to add item D to the finance report as an update to the fiscal year 21 budget.
Okay. Okay, anybody else before we begin? Okay, we are going to start with Citizen Speak. We have 15 minutes allotted for Citizen Speak. In case there's new members on the call to school committee for the first time, I'm going to go over the rules of Citizen Speak. Citizen Speak is here under the Robert's Rules of Order and the open meeting law to allow citizens of the town of Milton to come to an elected officials meeting to speak out their concerns, issues, etc. We have allotted 15 minutes, as I said. We ask that each speaker stay to 3 minutes in their comments. So as many people that need to speak within that 15-minute time will be able to speak. When you want to speak at the bottom of your screen, please raise your hand and Superintendent Pavlicek will promote you to a panelist to speak. And Dr. Spalding will time you just to give you the FYI. She has her cell phone there. And at 30 minutes, she's going to give you the FYI that it's your time to wrap up. And I'm asking everyone to be respectful for that. We do not respond at Citizen Speak. It is purely a time for us to listen and hear the comments that you all might want to make. So with that said, if anybody would like to speak at Citizen, the last thing I forgot to say, for the recording minutes, please state your name and your address before you speak. So we can note that in our minutes. So without further ado, is there anyone who would like to speak? Please raise your hand and Dr. Pavlicek will start promoting speakers.
The first speaker is Linda Lee Sheridan.
Okay. Linda Lee, you have to unmute yourself, hon. Bottom of your screen.
Thank you, Sheila. Good evening, Superintendent Jett, Assistant Superintendent Spalding, Assistant Superintendent Pavlicek, School Committee Chair Varela, and members of the school committee. My name is Linda Lee Sheridan, and I live at 57 Clifton Road. And Dr. Spalding, I may go over my time just a little bit tonight, but please indulge me. I join you tonight to recognize a friend and a dedicated member of your team. Obar, I'm already tearing up here, on this, his last official school committee meeting. So as you know, Dr. Glenn Pavlicek will be retiring at the end of next week, and I couldn't miss this opportunity to celebrate and thank him for all of his contributions to the town of Milton and the Milton Public Schools. I think it's important to recognize all his years of working in education as he retires, because for over 30 years, Dr. Pavlicek was a professor of mathematics and computer science at Bridgewater University, 20 of those years serving as the coordinator of the master's degree program in computer science. During that time, he brought those skills to the town and volunteered 4 years on the warrant committee. And for anyone who doesn't know, it is a very time-intensive commitment, and he rose to the position of chair very quickly of the warrant committee, which he held for 2.5 years. Using that wealth of knowledge he had from his service to the town and the warrant committee, he decided to run for another time-intensive position on the school committee to more specifically support the workings of the school district. He and his talented wife, Anita, have 2 wonderful sons, Ryan and Garrett, who both went through the Milton Public Schools. So I'm sure that giving back to the system that served them so well was forefront in his mind. Glenn served on the school committee for 9 years, 4 as chair, and I had the good fortune to serve alongside him for most of those years. During that time, he was, of course, the chair of the Finance Subcommittee. He was also a member of the School Building Committee that worked so tirelessly to build and renovate all 6 of our schools, and the town's Master Planning Committee. Honestly, there are probably more committees and boards that he served on that I don't even know about. But through all of these involvements, Glenn continually approached each opportunity with his easy laugh and positive, easygoing spirit. Then in 2013, we had an opening for the Assistant Superintendent of Business. Superintendent Gormley approached me, I was the school committee chair, highlighting that Glenn's skill set, experience, and unique business and his unique business and curriculum and budget knowledge matched our needs, and the rest is history. We felt like we had hit the jackpot when Glenn agreed to apply for the position and ultimately accepted it, as he wasn't really looking for a job at the time. Right, Glenn? In this role, he has worked not only with the leadership team and school committees, but parents, town government committees, and boards. His thoroughness and attention to detail distinguish him from all the rest. Here's a fun fact about the importance of Glenn's knowledge of school finances. Since 1999, he has analyzed, prepared, and/or presented every school committee budget. Please allow me to repeat that. For the past 20 years, he has analyzed, prepared, and/or presented every school committee budget. Wow. When the We Are Milton group that sponsors the Milton Music Festival and fireworks each June needed someone to serve as the treasurer, Glenn gladly took that role too. So as you can see, and as you probably know, Glenn Pavlicek is a special guy. One who is so intelligent and makes every task look easy. A guy who has generously volunteered over 14 years of service to the town and 7 more as a valued employee. And as he steps down as the Assistant Superintendent of Business for the Milton Public Schools, it's important to recognize that woven throughout these many responsibilities, his talent, his dedication, and his trustworthiness shines through. Glenn, I know you're not leaving town or your service to the town, as you and Nita are both town meeting members. And when we get back to town meeting in person, if folks in town ever wonder where the best seats in the high school auditorium are, let's look around. They have his name on them. Glenn, on behalf of my family, and may I say the residents of the town of Milton, we sincerely wish you and Anita many years of health and happiness in your retirement. All the best, my friend.
Thank you, Linda Lee, for those great words. We'll say something about him at the end. We've already, as Glenn said, gave our own wake. As he said, very few men get to hear their own wake before while they're still living when we had to announce this news. But thank you again at his last meeting officially as Assistant Superintendent of Business to speak those beautiful words.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Dr. Pavlicek, going back to putting you back to work. Is there another speaker?
Next is Leah Filippo.
Hi, congratulations, Dr. Pavlicek, and thank you, Ms. Sheridan, for those words. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Leah Filippo. I live at 23 Myers Lane, and I have 3 children, ages 7, 4, and 1. For 16 of the past 17 years, I have been a public high school teacher. This year, it has been both a privilege and a sacrifice to be on a leave of absence from my position in order to manage the homeschool portion of my children's education. I would like to thank Mr. Jett and the entire MPS staff for everything that they are doing to support my first grade daughter and her classmates. The Tucker Elementary teachers are some of the hardest working professionals that I have seen in my career. Remote teaching is endlessly more challenging than in-person teaching, to say nothing of the hybrid model. The teachers are doing more than they have ever done, while also dealing with frustrations from parents and most importantly from their beloved students. While I feel and unfortunately express frustration on a daily basis with my daughter with respect to her schoolwork, each day I am also humbled by the endless patience of my child's teachers. Madame Saij, Mr. Good, Mrs. Galuli, you are the calm within the storm and the candle that does not waver. My daughter trusts you and feels safe in your virtual space. She is so lucky and she is learning. I spoke of the privilege that it is to be able to stay home, so to speak, and support my daughter who attends Tucker in the hybrid model. I am at home and available to help her with technology, snacks, and schoolwork all day, every day. It is also a sacrifice. This is for several reasons, though the most poignant for me is the fact that this schooling model has created an ever more adversarial relationship between my daughter and me. This is not what schooling should be. It is not normal or natural. I am not a trained first grade French immersion teacher. I lose my patience with my daughter more often than I would like to admit, and I am, of course, like all parents, nervous about the critical skills that she is lacking after missing half a year of kindergarten and now attending first grade in person just 6 to 9 hours per week. I worry about her emotional well-being. I would give almost anything to have my child back in school full-time. Almost anything. What I would not give, however, would be the emotional well-being of a huge swath of the MPS student population. I would not give a further deepening of the achievement gap and the advantage gap between our students of color and their white counterparts. I would not give the physical health and safety of our teachers and of our students. At the school committee meeting 2 weeks ago, a caller from the community spoke about the pandemic and racial justice as being two separate issues. A second caller asserted how underinformed, and I would say pernicious, that opinion is. The two are inextricably linked. To that first caller and to any person in Milton who would insist that a full return to school be pushed forward regardless of how that decision will affect different groups and members of our community, I say this. A full return to school with a full remote option will create a dichotomy that will further harm a great number of our students, some of them already our most vulnerable. And it will deepen the disparities among our families of color and our white families, as well as our families of great financial means and those of lesser financial means. It will force teachers and families to make a decision based on supervision, money, and things other than their own health and safety and that of their household members. I want to reiterate that my daughter is learning in the hybrid model and her classmates are learning in the remote model. Is it the same? It is not. It is absolutely not. Is she learning as much as she would be in a normal year? Certainly not. That said, if we consider who this pandemic is affecting and who is at the highest risk of severe illness and death and why that is so, we know exactly which families will choose a full remote option and which will choose a full in-person option. To be clear, a disproportionate number of our Black and Hispanic families will choose the remote model because with good reason, they fear for their lives, and our white students will choose an in-person model. The repercussions of that will last for the rest of their educational careers and perhaps longer. And thus we will have created two separate systems of schooling, two separate and unequal systems within our public school system. Creating that dichotomy will harm my daughter just as much as it will harm her classmates, because make no mistake that ignoring racial justice harms all of our children. It weakens our education system and it weakens our community. I do not know what the right answer is. It is complicated and it is unprecedented. But to any who would seek to ignore the needs, the best interests, and the welfare of so many in our community, I would urge you to carefully consider the impact of your words and the framing of your argument, especially within our public school system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leah. Next speaker, Dr. Pavlicek.
Next is Patrick Hewitt.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, Patrick.
Okay, yep. Thanks. Sorry, it cut out there a second. So good evening, everyone. Thank you, committee members and Superintendent Jett, for the opportunity to address the Assembly. And congratulations, Mr. Pavlicek. I didn't know this was such a special occasion. Congrats. My name is Pat Hewitt. I reside at 36 Governor Belcher Lane. My daughter Hannah is in 2nd grade at Collycott. My son Liam is in kindergarten there. First, I want to express my admiration for Madame Kramer and Ms. Peralt, their teachers. Their enthusiasm and energy and resolve create a mood and environment for their students to get the most out of the current circumstances. I have some sense of how difficult this hybrid model must be to manage, especially with these younger grades. Madame Kramer and Ms. Peralt are setting an example daily for my kids on how to demonstrate resilience and grace in the face of adversity. They are a credit to Mrs. Concannon and the whole Collycott family. I know there are many parents around town who could paste what I just said next to their teacher's name, and that is a reason for all of us to be grateful. I've asked to speak at this meeting so that I can state my concern over the lack of a marked and labeled path toward increased school instruction. And I should emphasize safe in-school instruction, especially for the K through 3 cohort. The guidance from public health authorities is pretty simple and consistent. COVID-19, I should say in some ways, COVID-19 is going to be with us for a long time. Social distance protocols will be necessary for a long time. We've received incredible vaccine news over the past few weeks. Even if these vaccines roll out efficiently and effectively, it is expected that social distance protocols will be necessary through late 2021. I fail to see what circumstance or event will present during the course of the next 12 months, or perhaps longer, that will trigger a return to school, return to in-person school here in Milton, where our schools currently lack the space to bring kids back and still comply with social distance protocols necessary for keeping everyone safe. Since building a new school immediately is impractical, it feels like we're at an impasse for an unforeseeable amount of time. Unless we start getting creative about developing space, I implore the school committee and the administration to articulate a plan or circulate a list of needs that engages the community in getting creative about space. And I would tack on possibly surveillance testing, which could be another factor that could help us safely navigate our way back to school. And property owners, construction firms, and fundraising from parents and community members could all play a role in addressing the issues preventing a return to school. I'm confident we'll all be amazed by what we can do, but we need to know what is needed so we can mobilize and respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Dr. Pavlicek, any next speaker?
Next is Regina Murphy.
Can you hear me? Good evening. My name is Regina Murphy, and I live at 35 Alvin Avenue. I'm the mother of 2 children in the Milton Public School System. My daughter Ellie is in 2nd grade, and my daughter Rosie is in kindergarten. First and foremost, I would like to again thank the superintendent and school committee for everything you are doing for the children of Milton. We know you are working hard, and we greatly appreciate it. You may recall that I spoke during the last school committee meeting advocating for a full-time and safe return to school by January 4th for the youngest students in the Milton School District. I won't take up much time tonight, but wanted to make just a few follow-up points since the last meeting. It is well known and understood that elementary age kids have an extremely difficult time with remote learning. Many parents across Milton are watching their young children struggling to learn foundational math and reading skills through the current hybrid model. It simply does not work well for many, and there is no replacement for in-person learning. We also know that the spread of the virus is extraordinarily low in the school setting, and particularly at the elementary school level, since the children stay in one classroom for the majority of their day. In addition, I'm sure we are all reading the same reports that are published day after day by highly reputable sources, indicating that the virus is not spreading in schools at a significant rate. These studies provide scientific evidence that full-time school is safe. Expert upon expert is telling us that the children need to go back to school full-time. Dr. Fauci, the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Governor Baker, Massachusetts Department of Education Commissioner Jeffrey Riley. The list goes on and on. Furthermore, we should learn from the model that has been implemented across most countries in Europe, where the virus positive rates are extremely high, but yet children are in school full-time. This approach is working very well, and the virus transmission rates in schools continue to stay low. The evidence is so compelling for full-time school that even New York City is adopting this model and will be sending children back full-time. We know there are significant space issues in Milton, but we have to prioritize getting these kids back to school full-time. With my deepest respect, my question for the school committee and superintendent tonight is, when will you be presenting us with a specific plan to get the children of Milton back to school full-time? It has been discussed as a possibility during the last 2 school committee meetings, which gave me the first glimmer of hope that these kids might actually get back to school for more hours. But now it's time to see the actual specific plan. The evidence supporting full-time school is overwhelming, and the time to act is now. We all greatly appreciate everything you are doing, and we very much look forward to hearing about the specific timeline and plan either tonight or at the next school committee meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Regina. Next speaker, Dr. Pavlicek.
There are no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. We're going to move on to the superintendent's report, agenda item 4. Superintendent Jett.
So thank you very much, Chair Varela, and thank you folks for your comments during Citizen Speak. The first item up is we asked Food Service Director of the Milton Public Schools, Jackie Morgan, to come and present on the great work her and her food service staff are doing to support our folks during this time of need, and for most cases in helping food insecure of those who are in need. Jackie, if you would like to give folks an update.
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks for having me. And I'm thrilled to be here on Glenn's last meeting. He'll be missed. Just to give you a little update on food service, as you all know, the USDA has granted free meals to all children in the schools across the country. Whether they're food insecure, middle income, it does not matter. It's just trying to keep children fed and keeping them having healthy breakfasts and healthy lunches. So we've been doing a variety of things in our day-to-day school in our hybrid model, where we have to-go packages available for students to take home with them. So all 6 of our schools each day at dismissal have to-go bags, which either will be 2 breakfasts or 2 lunches, 3 breakfasts, 3 lunches, 4 breakfasts, 4 lunches, depending on what day of the week. And in addition to that, we have a weekly drive-through. And I will say we were very honored last Wednesday when school was closed on the 25th, I think it was November. We kept our weekly drive-through open. We're trying to be very consistent with Wednesday, that families can always count on coming to get weekly food. And Superintendent Jett surprised us and joined us for the morning session. And I have to say, families were just delighted to meet him and see him and be with him. But our food service staff is working very hard to stay contactless and stay safe. So our weekly drive-through has been a well-oiled machine, I'll say. We had it today. We do 2 sessions, 9:30 to 10:30. And then we also offer it again from 12:30 to 1:30 to help our families work around their schedules. And we're also trying to work around the high school schedule so the students and staff can get out of the parking lot in a timely manner. So that's why we have our 2 different time periods. We've been told that we block traffic on Canton Ave, and parents remind me that's a good thing, but I'm working very hard not to do that. So we had our weekly drive-through today again. We did 350 students in the morning, and then we did 200 and some odd students in the afternoon. So we're averaging about 530 to 700 on a Wednesday at our weekly drive-through. And then at our schools, Cunningham's doing about 300 meals to go. Glover does about 70. Glover does about 120. Middle school and high school are doing about 50 to 100 a day. But those bags are multi-meals. So we're trying to help all of our students every day have food available to take home. We call them to-go bags. We try to always have the first day a meal ready to eat that day so they can be ready for the remote learning at 1 o'clock. But we've had a real great success. Families are very, very thankful. And a lot of the beautiful things that they're saying is their students, can't wait to open up the bag and see what this week's surprises are. But a lot of them are saying it gives them a sense of normalcy, that their students feel like they're in school, at home, all day, every day, because they're having their school breakfast, they're having their school lunches. And it just, it's something for them to look forward to, which I know they looked forward to their meals before the pandemic. So it's been going really well. The food service staff are going above and beyond, working so hard. It's so different in food service, but it's also so rewarding and fulfilling to see all these students taking the meals to go. So it's been an interesting journey since March 18th, our first day of our drive-through meals, and we're still going strong.
Oh, that's me. Hold on. Sorry about that. It's my timer. Sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
So some of the things I just wanted to give you a little update is we had an amazing Thanksgiving donation from Steel and Rye, and Steel and Rye did a really above and beyond. They've been so gracious offering meals to our food insecure families during the pandemic. But then on Thanksgiving, they offered 25 family dinners to our families in Milton that Marty McKenna organized. And I just can't say enough of how wonderful it was and how excited the families were to receive these meals, and how rewarding it was really to deliver them out to families hot. And one of the moms said, "I have my oven on, ready to go." I mean, just really was such a beautiful, beautiful thing that Stale and Rye did for our families. And I just can't say enough how generous they've been to all of our families during this entire pandemic. And Stephanie O'Keefe's been a great liaison, helping us getting the marketing out and tweeting it and Facebook, I don't know the right terminology, and Instagramming it. And she always puts everything out there for parents to know. And it's really been such a team in the Milton Public Schools helping the school nutrition program continue to feed children. And I'll say it all the time, of ages 0 to 21. Because we're operating under the USDA's Seamless Summer program, we're allowed to feed ages 0 to 21. And it has been helping a lot of our families who have college students home. One mom told me today he has a hollow leg. He just eats and eats and eats and eats. And so we were able to give them 7 breakfasts and also 7 lunches. And then lastly, the USDA had been giving us produce boxes and weekly farm to family boxes. And unfortunately, the last round of boxes weren't really made available to Massachusetts. It was a kind of a very difficult, Congressman McGovern and Congressman Seth Moulton are both working diligently trying to find out why Massachusetts wasn't awarded those boxes like we have been since May. So the food service program, we've created our own produce boxes, and we're trying to still keep giving parents and children the variety of dark leafy greens and our red and orange vegetables that the USDA mandates we do, and also bringing variety into the fresh fruits and fresh vegetables to our families. So today our intern had made up flyers of how to cook kale and what to do with kale and a sweet potato recipe. So each week we're trying to include recipes with our weekly produce boxes that we're purchasing from Costa Fruit and Produce. So it's been an interesting journey. And a few of the kids today said that they were going to be the ones that made the kale chips at home with their new recipe. So that was really exciting. So it's been a really great opportunity. With food service, we just purchased some new coats for them to wear outside. It was a little chilly today, a little windy, especially when the sun goes in. So we're trying to keep our food service staff very safe, contactless, and keep them warm while they're outside for the few hours during Wednesdays.
I just want to say, Jackie, on behalf of the school committee, I think what you and your team have done since March is just truly amazing. And when you think of the fact that on Wednesday, those families come and for every child, they get 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches, it's huge. And, I know we're all struggling and dealing with a lot of issues with our families during the pandemic. But as Superintendent Jett puts out his good news stories, I think that, your food service is one of our biggest and brightest good news stories of the pandemic, that you're there to give those families a sense of, like you said, normalcy for food insecure families, to stay stable and feed their children. It's truly amazing. Jackie and I have been a part of the public schools for almost 20 years. I have 2 children who are type 1 diabetics, which plays a big part into nutrition and carb counting. And her program for all children who have food issues and health issues, they step up to the plate. They make everybody safe. They make everybody secure. And this is just another example in most trying times where you and your team have stepped up to provide. So thank you a million times over. I can't say enough for what you've done.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And another good news story I'll tell you is we started serving our special needs students are in the building every day, 5 days a week. And I have to say they're the highlight of our week so far. They are having lunch with us, very safe and spread out, but they're in school 5 days a week. And now they're telling me what they would like us to cook them every day. And we've been asking them their choices. And one boy just would like a hot dog every day. So I said, well, we can't do that, but we will definitely give you a hot dog once a week. But so they've been really, the food service staff, it's been such a beautiful lift. They're our best participants before the pandemic. They love to buy school nutrition. And we've been doing that at Cunningham, Collicott, Pierce High School, and Glover. So we started that on Monday, and it's been going really well. And then we give them a breakfast to take home that they eat at home the next morning before they come to school. So that's been a great week, too.
Thanks, Jackie. All right, back to you, James.
So thank you. Did anyone else have any other questions for Jackie? Great. Thank you very much, Jackie. And Jackie did mention it. I did have a pleasure, even though I violated some of the protocols, not being used to the routine. It's kind of a well-oiled machine that they have going, and I kind of slowed it up a little bit. But the experience and to see the smile on the faces of folks coming through and the faculty, I mean, the staff that you have working with them was definitely uplifting, especially this time of year. So thank you very much. Second, I want to give folks a quick update on the Manette Community Health Center. The testing that we had, that it was administered to over 250 folks on Friday, November 20th. It was held at Milton High School. We were able to do that at the time because Milton High School was remote. We did it in the field house. And it depends on how you look at things, but I was pleased out of the 250 plus folks that were tested, we only had 6 positive cases that came out of that testing. Not all necessarily within the Milton Public Schools, but a few. The good news is Manette Community Health Center said that they will be willing to partner up with us, possibly doing this once a month or if there's a need. Also over the vacation, I got an email from Carolyn Casella of the Board of Health that said Fallon was willing to partner up with the town of Milton. My hope is Carolyn Casella or those folks that are powers that be work and we get that testing up and running within the community to help us as we saw today on the news for the first time, and numbers skyrocketed to over 4,600 positive cases today. We know that the numbers are rising in the town of Milton, and just since this weekend, from Sunday to today, we've had 5 positive cases in ourselves. You know, 1 at the elementary level, 3 at the middle, and 1 at the high school level. And the reason why I bring that up, and we were very aggressive or very consistent or persistent and reminded folks about activities over the course of the holidays. And we know some folks travel. That in itself, because of the state guidelines, DESE guidelines, and also school policy, if you travel out of state and you're overnight, the policy is that folks had to either quarantine for a period of time until they get a negative test within 72 hours. Not solely Milton Public School policy, but that is a state policy. And so we wanted to make sure that we abide by that. And so any policy that we have, particularly the pre-screening, also the testing, we want to make sure that parents know that it is on an honor system. It is on the honor system. And I can't emphasize it enough. If students are symptomatic, and we said this to our faculty and staff, we encourage you to stay home if you're symptomatic and do that pre-screening before coming into the building. So I'm pleased, and we're looking forward to working with the Board of Health or with the town of Milton to see what we could do in concert with other organizations or other departments to make sure this is done for the community. And I think it has to be a community effort. So I do want to thank Marianne Dakak, who's a parent, and also a member of the Milton Public Schools COVID Metrics Advisory Team. She was able to coordinate that within about 24 hours for us to be able to test up to 400 folks, but we only about 200, a little more than 250 came through. So I look at that as a success, and hopefully that's something that we could build upon. Any questions from school committee members about the testing, or where do we go from here? Or? Thank you very much. Dr. Spalding, if you want to pull up the presentation that we're going to talk about regarding the models. So I know a few folks have asked, and I know people continue to ask, what is the model? And before I get into this, I do want to address a couple of things because I think it's important for me to continue to emphasize this. I did this on November 4th. I also did it on November 18th in terms of talking about the amount of time and effort. In order for us to get to this point this year to be open in this hybrid remote choice model, we had over 140 people, 140 adults, faculty, staff, administrators, parents, very smart people that worked diligently, cumulatively over 100 hours throughout the summer to devise this plan that we had. And we were preparing for the unknown. That went from May all the way up until August. Actually, quite frankly, it went into September because if folks recall, the governor delayed school 10 days so staff could come in. We had faculty, staff, and in some cases, curriculum coordinators and department heads who have not stepped in the building because the buildings were closed from March 13th until early September, or I should say late August, for the professional development. Once we opened on September 16th, to be clear, in theory, putting all of these policies and protocols in place until you have live bodies in the building and see how things move and how you execute. So the first month from September 16th until about October 16th, particularly in a hybrid with a few holidays sprinkled in there, we were making the adjustments to deal with the first model that we were looking at. So it was very difficult to start talking about a second model when we had to work to make sure what we had was successful and how do we build upon that. So I do understand the sense of urgency that people want to know exactly what it is to do. And we are having conversations about that. And that's what tonight's presentation is going to hopefully address some of those. And even still, it doesn't give you a concrete plan. It's going to talk about some of what we've been exploring, some of the challenges that we have, and the pros and cons of some of those plans. If we could go to the next slide, Dr. Spalding. So just to recap, 80% of the Milton Public Schools students, their families chose the hybrid, and 20% chose remote. And I know people are talking about the New York model, which I think is great, but I think if people read into the New York model a little bit more, almost 50% of your African-American Latino students chose remote, and 60% of your Asian students chose your remote. So they are able to do that because a larger portion or percentage of their population is out of the building because they chose remote. The second thing that they're doing in New York, they gave a hotline fast saying, now you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision, in whatever decision you make as of November 15th, I believe it was, you got to stay in that model for the remainder of the year. If more students go remote after you make that final decision, which right now everybody's seeing a surge, then they think about increasing more time. So I get the comparisons, and I still want to remind folks, when we make the comparisons from district to district, state to state, we have to look at apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And I would talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And then I think I forget the gentleman's name, if I'm not mistaken, Patrick Hewitt, I believe the name was, in Citizen Speak. And he said he hopes that the administration and the school committee gets very creative and put it out to the community about seeking space. And I say this very respectfully, Mr. Hewitt, you're going to see a little bit of that talking about the school building project that was proposed, but that has been an ongoing discussion that's been happening over the last couple of years, trying to seek alternative spaces. Even prior to the pandemic, I said this November 4th and November 18th, prior to the pandemic, the school committee, the central office administration, the principals have all been looking for different options and looking how to rent spaces or utilizing various spaces throughout the town. And there was a presentation in January 2019, one in February 2020, and you'll be seeing more presentations about that in the weeks and months to come, because it has always been an issue. So next slide, Dr. Spalding. So what are some of the structures that we have in place that we've been reflecting on? Faculty listening sessions by level, by school, and also by model, hybrid versus remote. I know prior to the vacation, I just finished up meeting with all remote families. I am going to do a couple of listening sessions with the hybrid families as well to get their feedback. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of feedback from a select few individuals, whether it be through Citizen Speak or emails or phone calls. And I want to be clear, I've been very responsive to every single one of the emails when people ask those questions. But I do say, if you email me today, please be patient because the emails come in. That's the only way people are communicating now, and you still have the business of the day that you have to execute. And so I ask for people's patience on that. We also had discussions during regularly scheduled meetings to reflect upon strengths and areas of growth for the current models, and that includes the hybrid and the remote model. From superintendent principals meetings, instructional councils, the elementary principal and coordinator meetings, building-based leadership team meetings, curriculum department level meetings, meetings with Milton Education Association leadership, meetings with the town. And when I say the town, I'm talking about, I want to be very thankful. The last bullet, well, one of the bullets I'm going to talk about with the director of the town, facilities in the town, Bill Ritchie, helping along on the town side, helping us get HEPA filters for all of the classrooms, especially now that we need it as the days are getting colder and windows are open. We need to make sure that we're adding another layer of security in there. I also want to let folks know that we get feedback from listening sessions with the existing structure, the site council. Just this past Monday, I met with all of the PTOs across the district. Before the vacation, I met with the Glover PTO and their families, and I met with the Tucker PTO and their families. So we are asking that, and I've always asked, what are your questions, your concerns, recommendations, or highlights? And I say that because we always have to balance it out. Not everything has to be 100% negative. We have to have a baseline from which we could build upon. And so there has to be pockets of some success, or at least I want to believe that. Regular meetings and monitor this and discuss local COVID-19 trends, not only with the metrics advisory team. Again, today on the phone with the commissioner's advisor, Anne-Marie Stronach, she knows, talking to the commissioner. The commissioner holds webinars with superintendents and assistant superintendents. I'm also on the phone and on meetings with we have a consortium of 29 superintendents that I work very closely with. And some weeks is 6 hours in that week, depending on what that is. And so we have these meetings and we're having these conversations. It's very similar to Milton. They're having struggles for different reasons based on what's happening in their community, or I should say challenges. And then the meetings with the commissioner, in having direct calls with the commissioner. The commissioner knows about our space issue. He knows the building capacities and he knows the utilization numbers. The commissioner knows our models. That email was given to him and the conversation was had very directly with him. So I do need people to understand these decisions are not made in isolation with myself, Dr. Spalding, and Dr. Pavlicek, or just the principals. We're having conversations along with those conversations with school committee members. Next slide, Dr. Spalding. So how has the model evolved since August? And I know people were talking about it, as I alluded to, the first month we were making adjustments. We had to revise the frequency and the length of the mask breaks to maximize student learning. We had to use the afternoons to conduct critical one-on-one evaluations. We still have special education services that we have to do, ELL services that we have to do. We have to monitor students. We have psychological evaluations or testing that has to be done. So not to do it during the in-person time, we're utilizing those afternoon sessions. We had to increase access to professional development for teletherapy in order to improve the services delivered remotely to some of our students. We had to increase the in-person hours for some of our special education programs, which I said on November 4th and November 18th, that was our next incremental step. We did that on Monday, the 30th. I had the luxury of walking around to each of the buildings that those programs were extended and speaking with the faculty and staff. I had the luxury of being at Collycott when you had the 3 individuals delivering the meals to the classrooms for all of the students before they leave and those who are staying. We had to shift protocols for the quarantines and responses to updated guidance. And I do want to emphasize this. There are a lot of parents that were out there that were concerned about the close contacts. And I have no problem as a superintendent of the Milton Public Schools to say that we were conservative. Not Kim Coughlin, not school committee, not teachers, James Jett as a superintendent, because I was always erring on the side of safety and security. And those are the things when you entrust us with the health and well-being of your children as they enter these buildings, it is my job, whether before as a principal and now as the superintendent, to make sure safety's top notch. We had an agreement. And we talked about this. The Milton Public Schools made a decision to acknowledge and adhere to the 6 feet social distancing. That was an agreement prior to myself being appointed to superintendent on the 26th of August and started the first day on the 27th of August. So those were things that were in place. And I do want to correct it. I said to a couple of folks, there were no changes in plans. And so to those parents, to Mrs. Cosio, who's out there, I want to apologize. There was a change in the plan early in August. I assumed you said I made that change. I've never made any of those changes in terms of switching the plans. We've made enhancements to make adjustments to better service our students in this current model. So when I'm wrong, and I would admit that I'm wrong, and I appreciate your critical feedback, and I respect you for that. So thank you very much. We increased use of live streaming for some of our students. I think I said it at a couple of meetings. When all of this planning happened, DESE, the commissioner, the governor, no one anticipated calls would come in or emails would come in at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night with positive cases. And then people have to do follow-up with students before they get on the bus. I think I mentioned that before. So that was another wrinkle in that plan that we weren't anticipating. There was one call that was done on a holiday, and I had to speak with school committee members. We had to assemble the metrics advisory team. I reached out to town administrator Mike Dennehy and Melinda Collins. I wanted to let folks know. I wanted to keep people involved. So I want people to know that we are trying to communicate. Now, I'm not going to say I communicate with those folks all the time, but that was the first big one that we were seeing, and we were making those adjustments. We have more robust online tools and supports for remote learning, CAMI, Schoolitics, enhanced Google features, reading and writing support programs for at home, in STEM bags, in hotspots, and more. So we're trying to make these adjustments, but again, we had to go through the process to see how a lot of this stuff works, and we had to try to do our best to master what we were already doing before we started thinking about shifting and going to another plan and making those adjustments. And also keep in mind, even though the students may leave half days, all faculty and staff are still working from 7:50 in the morning, and they arrive before that, and they still work all the way up until 3 o'clock. So it makes it a little different. And then you got to coordinate these meetings virtually because we can't have these large gatherings like we used to. So that's why it takes a little additional time. And I alluded to the air purifiers. This is huge, and the timing is perfect because even though we keep the windows open, having another layer of security and safety is beneficial to everyone, our students and our staff. Next slide, Dr. Spalding. What has been proposed to us, observed in other districts, and discussed? This talks about lengthening the number of hours elementary students are in person in the hybrid. And I'm going to talk about this in a second, but you also, when you're exploring the increase in the time, you want to think about the pros and the cons. You want to think about what your net gain is. And then you also want to talk about what do you have to give up, or what are some of the changes to make that happen. The second one was increasing the time students in the remote model in front of their teachers. That's very important. Superintendent Gormley promised the community we were going to try to do our best to make sure that we weren't accessing the learning management system, which were completely asynchronous. We wanted to make sure that you have live teachers and more importantly, see your teachers every day. So hopefully there's no regression or loss of knowledge or any disconnect, so to speak. creating 2 in-person sessions for our elementary students, one group in the morning and the other group in the afternoon. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then the middle and high school adjustments. Middle and high school, we also know, and they're still different in their own rights, but students at that age are a little more independent, but it doesn't mean, I know I hear people say, well, why don't you just let the high school and middle school go remote? In theory, that sounds great, but what about those families? So every single piece of this educational experience is very important for every single student, every single parent, guardian, and family, and every single faculty and staff and administrator that's in the building as well. We want the success because we know how well our students thrive is going to be a reflection on us. And if they don't, it's also going to be a reflection on us. So we're committed to it, but we also know that we're dealing with some challenges. Next slide, Dr. Spalding. And I'm sorry, this is kind of tiny for me to see now. I can't see this. But anyways, the first one over here, and if we could take a look at it and go horizontally, increase the time elementary students are in school. So when we move to in-person time, more in-person time for students in the hybrid model, we would need to schedule lunch during the school day to do at least 5 hours. But I do want people to understand this. On a good year, there's 6.5 hours that your children are in the building. 6.5 hours. 1 hour is devoted to lunch and recess. Now, obviously, recess would look a little bit different. It'll probably be coordinated into a movement break. But if you do increase it and you serve lunch in school, that time is going to be increased just because meals now have to be delivered to classrooms. Students would then be eating in the classrooms because some of the buildings don't have the cafeteria space or the gymnasium space. Then you got to talk about coordinated hand washing after the fact. And then you got to talk about the cleanup and stuff as you're going, because it's going to be very difficult to continue on with the teaching. So that's going to eat up a little bit more time, but I'll stick with the hour. And then we have our students outside of their core teacher. They have the electives from grades 3 to 5. They're in electives, sometimes they're in electives for 2 45-minute periods, which is about 90 minutes. Now that is an hour and a half that you're talking about. And then on a good year, they also build in a movement break sometimes at about 20 minutes. So you're looking at close to 3 hours, a little more than 3 hours with your core teacher, which is almost what you have right now. And then the electives, in some cases, are being delivered. But the bonus on that, in the afternoons, you get the opportunity to see your teacher. If cohort A is in the building in the morning, those students then leave, and in the afternoon, they go to the electives, and then that teacher now is connected in the afternoon with cohort B, who was at home during the day in preparation for the next morning of their return. The second one is shift the elementary model to one cohort in person in the morning and one in the afternoon. So I think we talked about this on November 4th, and I talked a little bit about it on November 8th. To do that, great. And we talked about it, and I think it'll provide opportunities for kids to come in 5 days a week in the morning, 5 days in the afternoon, 5 days a week in the afternoon. In order to do that, currently, we have 10 buses that do all runs for all schools. There's the Pearson High School run in the morning that drops off. Then the high school run goes and gets the Collicott and Cunningham students and then drop them off. And then those buses go and get the Glover and Tucker students and then drop them off. So think in the middle of the day to do that. Not going to say it's impossible, but I'm going to talk about the challenges. In order to do that, we are going to need extra buses. And the reason why I say that is because the 10 buses you have, let's say the students get out, Collicott and Cunningham get out 11:15, 11:20, whatever the exact time is, and the buses depart, that bus route is going to take 25 minutes, and then they got to go and get the Glover and Tucker students. Then when they finish that, they come and get the high school in middle school. That takes about 25 minutes as well. And then they have to go back and get the second cohort of Collicott Cunningham, and then the second cohort of Glover and Tucker. And when you look at everything, it'd be about a 2.5 hour, possibly 3 hour span, and that would extend the day and it will go beyond. Otherwise, we need the buses, and I think we talked about it before. A bus is about $400 a day. If you get 10 buses, that's $4,000 a day. And then depending on when we start, if that happens, then you multiply that by the number of days remaining in the school year. And that's what will allow us to do that. So it will reduce the school hours down to 2.5 hours during the day, but they will see their teachers in the morning or in the afternoon 5 days a week. So that is still a possibility. So even though I'm talking about this presentation, we're still trying to tighten up some of these things because they do involve either money or personnel. Bring all elementary students in for the full day by utilizing all school buildings. That was the model where you say high school students and middle school students go remote, and then you spread out all of the other schools. We have approximately 70 teachers at the elementary level across the district. Even if you bring all students in and you spread them across the building, we still can't put 23 students or 24 students in a classroom. So then you're gonna have to split them. And if you split them, naturally, you're gonna have to split teachers. So that's gonna involve additional teachers that are gonna be needed, whether they're long-term subs. And right now, we're having a hard time finding subs, quality certified subs now. And I think that's a challenge for all schools in all districts. That is a challenge. And so in theory, I get it and we want to do it, but we have to try to be strategic and look at every avenue because we don't want to make a swift decision or a quick decision and shift or pivot models and then have a setback and then it's going to create additional anxiety. And that's why I was asking people for their patience. So what I'm sharing with you now is some of the things that we've been talking about as a leadership group and talking about with other superintendents as we move forward. And then combine cohorts in a remote model. So we're talking about more virtual FaceTime, face-to-face time with a teacher. This would increase the class sizes to 24 or as high as 30. And unfortunately, we do have some that may be a little bit higher than 30 and would compromise the benefits of the smaller class sizes. So there's pros and cons to all of these models. And I know there's probably be a lot of questions and I could take those questions at the end. Next slide, Dr. Spalding. So the next steps, we're continuing to meet. We just had a meeting with all principals, director of pupil personnel with special education, the school nurse. We just had that meeting on Tuesday, yesterday at 1 o'clock. We're gonna continue to meet and discuss this. I know some of the principals are gonna have some discussions with their staff as well. Meet with faculty representatives for further discussion and open it up. Implement a staff survey by the end of December. Implement a parent guardian survey early to mid-January. My hope is it could probably go out by the end of December, but it's going to take some time. And then from the findings, we've solidified the plan, and then we continue to do a presentation, send it out in advance, do a presentation for school committee, and then we talk about a day in which we want to implement the shift. To be clear, the reason why I did not say January 4th, everyone, and people keep saying the governor, CDC, the commissioner, healthcare providers, listen to the science. Every single one of them have also expressed concerns about holiday travel and holiday gatherings. And so the anticipation is, if you look at today's numbers, 4,600, that has increased almost 2,000 from about a week and a half ago in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And again, we're not going by the numbers in the state, we're going by the numbers within the Milton Public School community and how it impacts us. And I also want to make a statement about the close contacts. We have revised that. And if you saw the news tonight at 6 o'clock, the CDC just made another update today, December 2nd. Wednesday, November 18th, when I did the presentation, there was an update from the CDC, DPH. Then on the 19th, there was an update from the CDC. And then on Monday, the 23rd, there was an update from DESE. So this is a constant moving target, and guidance is coming up. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right. They're following the guidelines, but we're adjusting, and we will continue to adjust based on the information that we're getting. So I do want to be clear to folks, we are exploring many options, many options. I did not talk about, even if we bring all the kids in, we didn't even talk about what it looks like. We talked about the number of buses we need, but bringing all the students in, our biggest ridership is the elementary. The guidance from DESE, the guidance from the CDC is social distancing. We have restrictions on the buses where we could only put one student per bench. So now if you bring all of those students in, as some people want, what do we do about those buses in terms of transporting kids on the bus? So we're thinking about food, we're thinking about cleaning, we're thinking about ventilation, we're thinking about safety protocols, we're thinking about time on learning, we're thinking about every aspect of this model, of these models, and we're trying to make it the best. But we also want to make sure we're just not pivoting in the net. If the net gain of time on task with your core teacher is 15 minutes, we got to ask ourselves, is that the goal? So we are looking at it. We will continue to explore it. I will continue to ask for information. I will be meeting with families in a hybrid model, probably by building, hopefully within the next week and a half, and we'll continue to take your feedback. So Chair Varela.
Yep, thank you so much for that thorough presentation, Superintendent Jett. I want to open it up to school committee members to see if you have any queries, comments on what Superintendent just put out for us tonight and the community. Member Marion.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Jett, for giving us that insight into the current thinking about and the effort involved in making any change to our program. I have a number of comments. One is that I think the leadership team in the Milton Public Schools right now is the strongest that I've ever seen it in my years working with the Milton Public Schools. And you have an incredible team of professionals who have the experience and the background and the resources to advise you and to think creatively, to analyze the situation and to figure out what's best for our kids. And I have great confidence in you and our team in being able to do that. And I look forward to hearing more about that. Another thing that keeps coming up to me with looking at these models is the relatively underappreciated aspect of the fact that kids see their teachers every day right now. And I just see that as a really important aspect of this, that kids feel that they're in touch with their teachers and that checkpoint and touch point. And I hear that from parents and from teachers about how important that is to them. And I would be hard pressed to give that up. It would have to really be a real advantage to one of the other models to give that up.
Rosemary, and thank you for bringing it up. And I do apologize because that is an oversight. What are the drawbacks of having students come in the full day? If you're teaching full day to one cohort, then the cohort that's at home is going to really be doing asynchronous, independent work on his or her own and not necessarily being able to connect, because within the full day, students get the electives, and then that also may be a drawback somehow, some way, and we have to see the ripple effects on how that impacts our students in a remote model as well. So I think that's very important for folks to know. But the beauty of this model, and I think if you talk to other people in other districts, and we have faculty and staff with kids in other districts, they do get to make that connection with their teachers every single day, their core teachers, whether you're in person or whether you're at home.
Lastly, I just wanted to ask, and I don't know if this has been explored yet, is what's the availability of more buses if we decided to pursue that option? Do we have any sense of that?
So go ahead, Dr. Pavlicek.
I've looked into this with First Student, our bus contractor. At the moment, there is some availability, but it's primarily because some of the districts they serve are currently remote. So if those districts were to go back into session, the issue of availability of buses could change. So it's not, basically the answer I got was, well, right now we're good. But, it will depend on what other districts do as well. There are only so many buses and only so many drivers available.
Thank you.
Member Everhart?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Mr. Jett, I just wanted to thank you so much for this presentation. And I really wanted to thank you as well. I know you pointed out in the presentation that you have really been operating, you came into this position overnight, essentially, and you've been operating under decisions made by other people. And you have been doing that with a lot of grace and with a lot of flexibility and working to help people understand decisions that were made prior to being appointed as the interim superintendent. So I just really want to say thank you to you and the whole team, and for you, just for your complete honesty and transparency. There's you to say what you said, that this is, you own everything, even though you didn't make the decisions initially. And I really can't thank you enough for that. It says a lot about who you are as a person and as a leader in a school district. And I really, really appreciate that. And, I appreciate too all the effort that the leadership team is making to look at the different models. I work in another school system. I talk to a lot of educators whose children go to other school systems. And even in those systems where they're in a hybrid model where they go like a full day, they only go 2 days. I don't know of any other district at the moment that has more than that. And then there's one full remote day for everybody. So I think that our hybrid model is unique in its own right, that it alternates the number of days. And I commend your efforts. I know that it's hard for families. I feel what they're saying. Everyone on the committee knows I would have gone back to school in May. I desperately wanted to go back to school last year. And, to speak to the commissioner and the governor, they left districts hanging. They may very well be out on TV right now spouting what they think should happen, but they left us hanging to make a lot of decisions on our own very late in the game. So when they're out there and they're on TV and they're spouting that everyone needs to go back to school, they should remind themselves they left us hanging with very little support. So I just want to thank you and everyone for your hard work. We're listening to the parents. We respect what you're saying. We know kids need to go back to school. We understand that. And we're desperately trying to make things happen safely and in the best possible way for all of our students and for our staff.
And I appreciate those comments and thank you, because again, you prompted me to say something else. So on behalf of the leadership that you guys are referring to, I accept it on behalf of the faculty and staff and all of the families. And I say that sincerely, because even those who may not be pushing full in person, or may not be coming in and expressing their displeasure with this, we understand that they too don't think this is ideal. None of us do. There's not one teacher that ever thought that we would be in this position and wanted to be in this position. And it's those teachers who are giving principals, myself, critical feedback, because quite frankly, they're the ones that are in the trenches. They're in the classroom every day. They're working with the students, so they have the perfect lens to really see all the challenges we have, and we have to address those challenges. And the other thing that I know that people keep saying is kids, there's no spread among students. But I want to remind people that we have 600 and something plus faculty and staff that are in the building as well. So it's also managing them. So I think every parent that comes out gives the credit to the teachers, because quite frankly, it's not the teacher's decision either. And so sometimes you might hear the comment, I will be clear, I can't speak for other districts. And I said this before. MEA is a union, Milton Educators Association. It is separate from or works in concert with the MTA, Massachusetts Teachers Association. This notion that our teachers don't want to be back, that is false. Our teachers are back every day working, unless of course there was a school closure, right, or a close contact or a positive case. So I think it's important to recognize that. And I also think it's important to recognize the nurses that are in the district. I would be remiss because we've been talking about this in terms of staffing. For those that don't know, the student to nurse ratio at the secondary level, and that is middle and high school, is 1 nurse per 750 students. We have over close to 1,200 students at the high school. We have close to 1,000 students at the middle school. The student to nurse ratio at the elementary is 1 nurse per 500. You got one elementary school, 671, one 640, one close to 630, and then you got one. We only have one school in the district in compliance, and that's Tucker, because they only have about 460 something students in their building. So there's a lot of work that goes on, and I don't think anyone is choosing to do it. And I'm not sitting here making excuses, but it's a lot more work and a lot more detail than the average person is understanding. And I can sit here and we could talk about it for almost a week, all of the small details that folks are adjusting to every day, trying to put out crises and dealing with last minute issues and unknowns. So I definitely appreciate that. And then the final comment I'll make about that, because that was another misunderstanding that I said at the meeting when people said the commissioner didn't give us guidance, this and that. Yeah, they told us 3 feet, aim for 6 feet. If not, go to 3 feet. They told us about PPEs. What I meant to say, and I want to be clear, they had the ability to say, focus on elementary only. All elementary schools go in X number of hours or every day. That's what I meant. They could have set the tone so you had some consistency throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, particularly. That didn't happen, and you left it up for districts to do it based on their own local control and make these decisions on what's best or how they see it best within their community, given working within the confines of the restrictions that they're faced with locally. And that's what happened. And so I commend every single parent or every single person that was on that return to school task forces, some very bright people, but this was the plan that they developed. This is the plan that people talked about.
Can't hear.
Sorry, Member White.
Right. Thank you, James, for the presentation. And I just want to say that I really am very grateful for all your hard work and for all the faculty's hard work, and also for your caution and the sense that safety comes first. And I was watching the news earlier tonight, and Dr. Redfield, the director of the CDC, was on saying that the United States of America is heading into the 2 most difficult months coming up in the whole history of public health in this country. So as I certainly understand parents' angst about getting their kids back to school as soon as possible, in a safe way, in front of their teachers as much as possible. Working in an elementary school, I understand that. I see it every day. I also think that the idea that we're going to be ready to go back January 4th, given the fact of what the director of the CDC said tonight, really seems unrealistic. And I still want us to continue to work towards looking at ways to get the kids back, but I think we need to be very cautious and very focused on safety of the children and of the staff.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Dr. Donahue.
Kevin wants to talk.
Thank you, Chair.
Can you hear me? Yeah, Dr. Donahue.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to thank the superintendent for that presentation. I know he's been working hard and diligently working with the educators and central office to find a way to get more in-school hours for the students across the grade levels. And I know it can be frustrating that a lot of these conversations are tentative, and they rely on information being supplied from outside agencies and outside locations, i.e. the state and federal government, and conditions on the ground. And that is hard. And I want to acknowledge my appreciation for that sort of daily grind, weekly grind with those meetings, talking with those individuals, and trying to find a way to wring out more hours for the day. I want to acknowledge some of the frustrations that we hear from the parents. This is not even okay. This is, in a general sense, this is a catastrophe. We are living through a catastrophe, and that perspective, I think, is needed in how we approach this. And it is very, very hard and very frustrating. And, you know, I think we all live this. I know I certainly live it. I have 4 children, and 3 of them are in the Milton Public Schools at the elementary level. And these are not easy days at all. And I want to acknowledge those parents who are feeling the stress of their children, and the feeling that their children are behind. They're not learning enough. They're not learning fast enough. And as one of the parents spoke earlier today, that relationship that's not a parent-child relationship, that becomes an educator-child relationship, and the sort of adversarial turns that it can take, and that is hard too. And you know, the mental toll that this is taking on us is real, and it is something that we will have to grapple with, as is the educational toll. And I want to speak to my colleagues that are not just here among us, but that are on the other boards in town, that the long-term widespread effects of this are going to be dramatic. This is the educational losses that we will have suffered over the last 12 to 18 months that we were out of school are not going to be fixed in a year or 2 years or 3 years, or probably even 5 or 6 or 7 years. This is a major problem that will require a significant investment of resources to remedy. And we need to be ready for that as a town, and we need to advocate to the state and the federal government for that. An analogy that I would like to offer, and we've used a lot, and I think a lot of people have used, is a wartime analogy. And I think in some ways it's appropriate, and in some ways it's frustrating. But I would point to I'd point to the loss at Dunkirk, and the fact that it took 4 years to reestablish a Western Front in the Second World War, and that was a hard strategic decision to make. And throughout that 4 years, there was a lot of learning, and there were a lot of other steps, the North African campaign, the Italian campaign, but this is hard, and it takes time. And all I can say to the parents who are out there listening and are frustrated and are having the same conversations that we're having in my house, and I'm sorry, and we're there with you, and we are doing the best we can. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you for the detailed presentation. As I look at things from the elementary level, I think that there are 2 realistic plans. One is to find a way to eat in school. The other is to find money to provide buses for a second PM shift in school. And I know that you're working on that, and my outside perspective is that those seem to be the most favorable avenues of approach, and I'm sure that one of those will probably yield some fruit in the next few weeks. I will say that, sort of wrapping up what I've said here, that if you have 2 seconds to talk about the contact tracing and its importance there, and sort of your efforts at the high school and middle school to sort of to shrink those contact pools and to track them down as fast as possible, so that we can minimize the days that we go remote there. And then second last point that I'll make is that, frankly, I'm impressed that we're still in school now. When we came up with these hybrid plans in the summer, I fully expected to be fully remote by late October, early November. And the fact that we still have students in the building now is I'm pleased with. I know that everybody is not pleased with that, and there's a push for more, but that was my realistic perception. And I think it was a lot of people's realistic perception. And I won't speak for other people, and I don't want to be accused of rewriting history, but I think that to be realistic, that was sort of the realistic perception of how the fall was going to unfold. So with that, I'll stop talking.
So thank you, Member Donahue. So the contact tracing, myself, Kim Coughlin, Helene from the DPH that works very closely with Commissioner Riley, along with Carolyn Casella, had a lot of conversation. Again, as I mentioned, the DPH did some updates over the court, well, prior to the vacation. I think it was the 18th and the 19th of November. We were strict, we were more conservative. So now what we're doing, and we updated it, is up on our website. It will go home in the email blog with the link. They bring you to the website. Before, if you're in a household, I use myself, if James Jett is positive and I have a child and that child is not showing any symptoms, that child is still a close contact. That child will stay home. At that point in time, it will not have an impact on the kids within the classroom, even if he was in school that day. But that child will still have to quarantine for a while. Now, I'm speaking out of turn because I just saw updates and I got to go to it. CDC said now it's 10 days. You don't even have to get tested. You just quarantine. So that was just today, December 2nd. So just as we changed our policy on Monday, another policy is coming up. And so we're going to have to make that adjustment. And I can't emphasize it enough for those who are viewing this on this call. Please share that piece. That's why we're asking people to use the live links and go to the website, because when that is updated, it's linked to DPH or it's linked to CDC or the Board of Health. Use the live links, because as I just mentioned, we talked about our policy right before Thanksgiving and right on Monday. And here we are, there's a new update again because the science is moving. So we will follow that guidance to the letter, and that may, or at least I'm optimistic or hopeful that may not impact more students and staff, and hopefully it doesn't shut down the schools. So I want to be clear on that. The other thing that I do want to address, and you talked about a war mentality, Dr. Donahue, and I think this is, I would agree with that. In the war, whether you dislike the person that's on your side or not, you stick together and you move forward to try to survive. And that would be my parting shot to, or my last comment to all of the folks on this. I get that people are frustrated. If you really think that I like coming on the school committee meeting and being able to listen to citizens speak and not be able to respond, or to take these emails, or the complaints to DESE, or the complaints in the paper on Facebook, that's not a good feeling. I'm a big boy, I could take it, but it's not a good feeling. So if I could remedy that situation, I would definitely do that. It's not a good feeling when the community is being pinned against teachers or educators or unions. That's not a good feeling. If we had the quick fix answer, I could assure you every single staff member that I know that we're in the trenches with would have done that back on September 16th. Better yet, we wouldn't even have delayed the school year. And quite frankly, some people asked not to delay the school year because we wanted to take advantage of those nice days to be able to test outside. And that's the piece that's getting lost in all of this debate going back and forth. And then finally, the surveillance testing. To put this in perspective, Manette Community Health Center had about, I think it was 10, 12, whatever people, there's a lot of people here to test 250 people. I just gave you the numbers on the nurses. We're having a hard time getting a substitute nurse. We have nurses that work with us, and we have medical waiting room nurses, two of which will be leaving in December. Well, actually, this is December. So who's going to do that surveillance testing? Where it's going to happen? And this is why I will call out, and I'll continue to ask for the support of the Board of Health. I'll continue to ask for any money that is able to support that. But that, in addition to trying to educate students, and I know other schools are doing it. You know, I know Wellesley did $350,000 that they raised, their MFE, I'm assuming their WFE. They raised $350,000 to do surveillance testing. They were closed before the high school and the middle school closed, and they didn't start until I think it's today, December 2nd or December 1st. And so that's $350,000. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. Where does the money come from? Who does it? And I know that the state is saying we could roll out these swabs, the spit tests, whatever it is. That too takes a lot of people to administer those tests, collect those tests. You know, it's a little more difficult than people think, and we already have a difficult time with the current nursing staff that we have. And as much as Kim Coughlin and our nurses are being viewed through a critical lens, and sometimes the brunt of negative comments, they're not seeing that Kim works every single weekend, every single night. In fact, I had to get off the phone with her tonight to say that, you know, it's my daughter's birthday. I'm doing this before school committee. So I want people to know that people are working hard and we don't take this lightly. And I know you guys are getting the brunt of the emails as well, but this is why I call for the entire community. It's okay to disagree. That's how we all grow. But let's not get nasty. Let's not target people. Let's rise above that. I've been in this town for a very long time, and we've had some negative experiences, and those negative experiences are supposed to build our character, build us a little stronger, and hopefully encourage us to work together to make this happen.
Jet. I'm just going to ask a technical, a financial question on the presentation, and I guess this will go to Assistant Superintendent, who's still at the meeting, Dr. Pavlicek. The $450,000 estimate for buses to do 2 runs. So I concur with Dr. Donahue that it's either, you know, a longer day with lunch and maybe not seeing everyone every day, or, you know, 5 mornings, 5 afternoons. So, you know, $450,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And I know the town has a COVID grant and we have a COVID grant that expire on the 31st. We've pretty much gone through almost all of ours. But even if the town could give us that, it has to all be spent by the 31st. And, you know, we can't take money. I don't know where the money would come from January to June, of $450,000. I mean, I know Wellesley, you just said raise the $350 for testing, but that's a lot of money. So I don't know where that's coming from because, you know, we've had to finagle a lot. We'll speak to it later under finance about FY21 and the 6 teachers that we hope to have put in place in January moving forward. But I just want to be realistic about $450,000. You know, it has to be a joint effort of where we would get that from to pay the bus companies for 2 runs a day. You know, I just want to. Am I incorrect in speaking to that, Dr. Pavlicek?
You're correct in that both the town's CARES grant and our COVID grant come from a federal source that require that we spend it by December 30th on services delivered by December 30th. So we would be unable to use it for any kind of bus transportation after that. You know, the number is an estimate. We have a contract with First Student. We pay $408 a day for a bus. That's the contract. Our buses do, you know, 3 runs in the morning, 3 runs in the afternoon. Even if we could manage it so that you only used 1 bus and we could squeeze something in by some interesting maneuvers in the midday, and you could actually still do it with the morning, the midday, and the afternoon with 1 bus, we would have to pay for 2 buses because that would be more than the 2 groups of 3 runs that we currently pay for. So even if it was physically the same bus in the afternoon that it was in the morning, the cost of it would still be 2 buses because it would exceed our 6 hours and 6 runs that are in our contract. So, could we, the tricky part is, people, we were actually discussing this afternoon. Could we ask people, what if you, ask people who don't want to take the bus, can they, would they be in the afternoon session or something like this, as opposed to, the morning session? The issue is busing is a legal entitlement for students in grades K through 6 who live more than 2 miles from school. And even if we were to do that and say, all right, if you don't want to take the bus, maybe you can be in the afternoon session, we'll just put bus students in the morning session. If someone then in the afternoon session said, it's not working for my family, I need a bus, we would have to find one. We cannot hold them to giving up their right to a bus because it's a legal right. You would have to get into things like saying to, students in grade 7 and above who are not entitled to ride a bus, that maybe we wouldn't have high school buses, for certain things. But then you're talking about, what do you say to a student who's a 7th grader who lives on the Milton Quincy border in East Milton, where we say we're not going to give you a bus, but you have to be home in an hour and a half for your afternoon session. That's a problem. So it is tricky, complicated by the fact that, we don't own buses, we don't own the drivers, we contract to a private firm, we bid them every 3 years. So, what they have is what they have. And what, if they have more drivers, they have more drivers. If they don't have more drivers, they don't have more drivers. We don't have the option of saying, oh, I'll drive the bus. First off, I don't have a CDL, but I wouldn't do it on a bed anyway. But we are somewhat constrained by the nature of the situation. I know Betty works in Dedham. Dedham has their own buses. That's a different situation. But we're Milton, where we contract out, it is a different, somewhat limited situation.
Okay, just wanted to know that. Okay, well, again, thank you, James, for that thorough presentation and all of your words of wisdom and summarizing it up. We're going to move on to Chair's report. I'm going to turn it back over. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
My last piece is kind of good news, bad news, good news. As Linda Lee Sheridan said in the Citizen Speak, I just wanted to take this opportunity myself to acknowledge Glenn Pavlicek. I kind of, well, not even jokingly, 2 Mondays over the last month, I wake up in a cold sweat saying, Glenn, don't go. And people are wondering who I'm talking about. Glenn is Dr. Pavlicek is one of the individuals that really, not only is he extremely intelligent, excellent businessman, smart, quick wit. He's a huge part of the success of the Milton Public Schools to keep us afloat, especially when times when I do believe in my heart of hearts that we are, in some cases, underfunded to do what we need to do. Glenn he's a big picture thinker. And so in one capacity or another, Dr. Glenn Pavlicek has been involved with the Milton Public Schools since 2000, perhaps maybe even earlier, serving on PTOs, Milton School Committee, several other school committee subcommittees, finance, policies, facilities, school building, et cetera, as well as a town committee such as Warrant Committee and the Master Planning Committee, and probably even more that I'm unaware of. When Milton Public School principals realized that tonight that Dr. Pavlicek's last school committee is tonight, many of them expressed their gratitude, and I wanted to take this opportunity to share some of their comments. Karen McDavick, Glover principal, said it has been an honor to work under Dr. Pavlicek for the past 5 years. He has led this district with grace, dignity, and professionalism. He has a wealth of knowledge, and I often marvel at how much he actually has stored in this incredible brain of his. Glenn is always there for us when we need him. He manages the business end of the district impeccably, and every student, staff, and family members in the Milton Public School is better off because Mr. Pavlicek has been at the helm. I will miss Glenn very much, both as an inspirational leader, colleague, and as a friend. Thank you, Glenn, for your unbelievable service to the Milton Public Schools, and most importantly, thank you for being you. Emphasize on you. You are one in a million. Dr. Redden, principal of the Cunningham School, said in all the districts that I've worked in or observed, Glenn is by far the most involved business superintendent that there is. In fact, most of my conversations with Dr. Pavlicek did not involve budgets or purchase orders. It was more like registration, buses, clearing the attic, a lot of the Cunningham School, lottery for French immersion, or of course the Mardi Gras. He is involved in all aspects of the school, all the way down to the school learning walks. My first interactions with Dr. Pavlicek was presenting to him at the school committee meeting as a first year principal. When it was over, he quickly put me at ease with his comments about this presentation, my site council presentation that I had put together. He pushed me on the data, and the data that was not included, which I really appreciated. I didn't realize it then, but his ability to ask questions as a helpful thought partner would be what I would come to value the most. When he started as the business superintendent, he supported me to not put the MSc program in the red since I was hiring everyone who had an idea for an activity to work. While it was by no means fun to look at the payroll spreadsheets and chase payments every summer, he made that part of the work much easier. I wish Glenn the very best in his retirement. Is so well deserved. Dr. Elaine McNeil-Gamay said Glenn is an all-around great leader in the Milton Public Schools. He can always be counted on, in addition to his amazing calculations, for a bright smile, an adventurous story, and a unique gift. He is always supportive and prompt with his information and think big picture to help solve complicated problems. We are grateful for all of this amazing achievements and initiatives in the Milton Public Schools, and in particular the Tucker School team and community wishes him well on his well-deserved retirement. Holly Concannon, principal of the Collycott School, stated that Glenn has been a mentor, a common presence, and a friend, and a wonderful support of the Collycott community. I wish his wit and humor, along with I will miss his wit and humor, along with his expertise guidance. Karen Cahill, the principal of Milton High School, said, Glenn has been a quiet support for me over several years, always available to provide advice, give direction, or just listen. I appreciate all he has done to support our students and staff throughout the years. Best of luck to you, Glenn. In all of your future endeavors, you will be missed. Bill Fish, principal of the Pierce Middle School, said it has been a pleasure to work very closely with Glenn over the past year and a half as a member of the Milton Public Schools and also as a parent of Milton Public Schools students. I am grateful for Glenn's unwavering commitment to our schools and our community for the past 20 plus years, and wish him a healthy and well-deserved retirement. And then Jackie Morgan, Director of Food Services, who you heard speak earlier, said that she wanted to say Glenn is the smartest, kindest, and funniest person that I ever had the honor of working with. And in closing my comments to Glenn, I've worked with Glenn for many years since he's been the assistant superintendent, always down in his office, asking for money, asking for support and programs and guidance. Glenn has always been one of the people that you could rely on to give you honest feedback in sensible direction. One of the things that I admire most about Glenn is Glenn has a healthy balance of his personal life and his professional life. He is a busy guy and travels and enjoys his families. I wish Glenn the very best, and I know he's not going far. He has assured me that we can reach out to him on his cell phone if needed. But also we need to be mindful of his retirement and his time with his wife, Anita, and his family. So Glenn, Dr. Glenn Pavlicek, I want to thank you for your many years of services. I appreciate the very short time that I work with you. Dr. Spalding and I constantly sit in awe as you leave the office, and we're still trying to do the calculations that you already told us to try to confirm it's accurate, and it always turns out to be accurate. So thank you. Your presence in the office will be missed, but your spirit and your legacy that you leave behind will be there for a long time. So thank you very much for your service.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Pavlicek. And before I conclude, I just want to give another quick update, and I probably should have did this first. I want to give a quick athletics update and congratulate all of our fall athletes, albeit a short, very different and uncertain athletic season. I wanted to congratulate all of our all-stars. In golf, we have Ben Catuto. In soccer, we have Josiah King, Miguel Varela, Justin Gomes, Ian Wick, Elaine Nade, and Claire Walco. For cross country, we have John Carew, Donovan Murray, Alec Carew, Stefan Afanato, Nora Afanato, Christina Sullivan, and Olivia Duggan. For swim, we have Ella Anthony, Rose Galuli, Madison Crummy, Andrew Tron, Christian Botkowitz, Andrew Scapicchio, Phil Hockey, Kat Baker, Natalie Vaughn, and Christina Sweeney. Winter sports are set to commence on December 14th. Unfortunately, only basketball, hockey, and ski are allowed to be played this winter season. Even though it's shortened, we definitely expect great success out of all of our athletes. So I just want to thank everybody again for their support and look forward to better days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent Jett. Okay, I'm going to move on to the chair's report. I'm actually going to do a switch up and do item B before item A. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Elaine Craighead, who was our representative this year at the Massachusetts Association of School Committee annual meeting. It was shortened to just one day, talk about the resolutions. We spoke about these back in September, and we had to bring what our vote was to the table to speak to it. So Dr. Craighead, as I said, represented us, and she's here to report out on the findings of what happened.
Thank you, Chair Varela. Yes, I was the delegate for the MASC assembly, and we spent a very beautiful, it was an absolutely gorgeous Saturday afternoon for 3 hours at this meeting. So I was a real nudge about reporting out on this because I wanted to make sure that my 3 hours were somehow recognized by the rest of you. There were 10 resolutions that were proposed, and 5 of them were passed in an omnibus motion without discussion. Okay, so nobody sort of held them out for discussion, and those were Resolution 2, COVID-19 state funding, Resolution 3, the anti-racism resolution, Resolution 6 on the retention of Medicaid revenue, which is great, Resolution 8, the membership of a school committee member on the board of elementary and Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So, and then the final one, Resolution 9, providing equity for sexual orientation, LGBTQ plus students, teachers, and staff. So all of those passed without discussion. And so I was misled into believing that it would be a very brief meeting, but it was not. So we went back, and resolution number 1, which was about MCAS, last year's 10th graders, and whether or not those 10th graders should have to make up that MCAS test. After much discussion, resolution 1 passed. That is, they don't have to make up the MCAS test. Also, after much discussion, resolution 4 passed, and that was the minimum voting age in municipal elections at 16. It passed to reduce the age of a voter in a municipal election to 16. It passed, but it was passed 64 to 49. It was by far the closest of any of the votes that we had that afternoon. Resolution 5 for supporting increased federal support and stimulus funding for public K-12 education passed, but an amendment was added for this support to be garnered through a progressive tax increase. That is, the more you earn, the higher your tax would be. As amended, that passed, and that passed 117-1. So that wasn't even close. Resolution 7 passed. Attempts by the U.S. Department of Education to direct public funding to private schools. That was rejecting those attempts, basically, or standing against those attempts, passed 108-6. And the final resolution that was related to the monitoring of attendance of students during the pandemic was actually tabled. There was no resolution to that and no motion made to vote. So that's my update on the delegate assembly.
Super. All right, thank you so much. And thanks again for hanging in there and representing us.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. All right, we're gonna go back to A, and I'm gonna ask Member Eberhardt to give an update on the superintendent search, permanent superintendent search.
Thank you, Chair Varela. So thank you to Stephanie O'Keefe, who helped us get the survey link out to the community. And thank you to the ELL department for helping with the translation, text, and information for families in different languages. I really appreciate all the effort that everyone made to make the survey available to everyone and in languages that they speak. So I really appreciate that. The survey will be open until the end of the week. And I will be gathering the data from MASC and then compiling it and presenting it at maybe some of it at our next school committee meeting in December. And then of course at our forums in January. And if you have any questions, please email the school committee if you have had any trouble with the link or any information that you would like to have about the survey, or if you know of someone who needed a translation and wasn't able to access information, just let me know and I'd be happy to help and point people in the right direction. But fill out the survey and participate in the process, and thank you everyone for their support.
Thank you, Member Eberhardt. We're going to move on to Finance Subcommittee report and turning it back over to Dr. Craighead.
Thank you. First on the agenda is the preschool fee. What's today? Today's the 2nd of December. At our last meeting, which was on the 24th of November, that isn't our last meeting, but on the 24th, we met and one of the things that we discussed at length was the tuition for the Blue Hills full day preschool. Since the number of hours has been significantly reduced for those students. We, as I said, discussed it for some time and voted in finance to recommend to the full school committee that we reduce the tuition for the Blue Hills full day preschool from the normal rate of $8,400 for the year to $6,000 for the 2021 year only, because this change is due solely to the pandemic, in consideration of those changes to the program. So I'd like to make a motion, and we can discuss it after if you would like to. I'd like to make a motion to reduce that tuition for only the Blue Hills full day preschool from $8,400 to $6,000 only for this particular school year, 2021 school year, in consideration of the pandemic related changes to the program. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Member White. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Member White, are you going to abstain? Oh no, okay, so that's 6-0, that's unanimous, thank you. The second thing is on the agenda is the FY22 budget proposal, which Dr. Pavlicek is going to give us a heads up on. Thanks.
Okay, so at the Finance Subcommittee meeting yesterday, the Finance Subcommittee voted to endorse a proposal to the Warrant Committee for the fiscal 22 budget. So what we did was we started by looking at where it's actually two different numbers. One is just a strict rollover of this year's staffing. Now, that takes a little bit of explanation because this year is unlike any other year in terms of what our staff looks like. But what I mean by that is we're looking at our regular staff, teachers, and so forth, and looking at them and just rolling them into next year, adding the step and lane or anything involving their promotion or their experience. But it does not include people that we hired on a temporary basis. So for instance, people that we brought in as long-term subs who are in a classroom while a teacher is zooming into it, who are not normally part of our staffing, but were hired for this year. People like the nurses in the medical waiting rooms who are not normally part of our staff, and any sort of one-time expenditures, particularly those, for instance, that might have been covered by the coronavirus grant or by the CARES grant, but things were unique to this year. We did not roll those forward. What we're talking about is trying to look at a budget in somewhat of a more normal circumstance. Our budget this year is $53 million for this current year. Oh, I should say that the assumption that I've made, we are presenting this to the Warrant Committee after the special town meeting. The numbers I'm giving you tonight are assuming that the positions that are being asked for, requested by the school committee, have been recommended by the Warrant Committee, have been recommended by the Select Board, are actually approved by town meeting next Monday. Were that not to happen, we would have to make some modifications to this. But I was assuming that those positions would be funded for this year and we would be rolling those forward into next year as well. Given all of that, the rollover for our budget is $1.97 million, or about 3.8%. That takes into account all of our staff, anticipated special education costs. Utilities are very hard to predict this year. We're really working off 2 years ago, the last real year of utility costs, because last year was, again, anomalous, and this year is as well. So we're working off what 5-year trends that I have. And so that $1.97 million, which is actually a little less than it was last year. Last year was just a little over $2 million to roll the system forward, would be our rollover level service budget. What we then asked the administration to look at is, well, what are the needs for next year above and beyond just rolling staff over? And there was discussion among the leadership team from the principals on up through central office and then with the finance subcommittee. So what we are looking at as a request for anything above level service would be the following. Currently we have 2 reading specialists at the elementary school. One does 2 schools, the other does the other 2 schools in K through 2. The special town meeting in December is asking for a reading specialist to deal with grades 3 through 5, but that reading specialist would be stretched across 4 schools. And we do believe we are, one of the effects of this is we are going to need to spend more time remediation. As was said earlier, this is not a short fix. With the effects of this closure are going to linger for quite a while. So one of the one request we had for next year is a second, well, actually a 4th elementary reading specialist, a second for grades 3 through 5. So you would have one for 2 schools and one for the other 2 schools. Again, complicated by the fact that our elementary schools don't all stop at the same time. Cunningham and Collicott and Glover and Tucker have different respective starting times, so it's hard for one person to cross the 4 schools. A second position was a middle school guidance position. We have now 1,000 people at the middle school. The recommended ratio of guidance counselors to students is 250. We have 3 guidance counselors for 1,000 students. So we'd like to add a 4th guidance counselor. It's an age where we really need some support in those students at middle school. As anyone who dealt with middle schoolers knows, it's not an easy age. And at high school, we're asking for a special education position. Our high school special education enrollment has climbed dramatically from 150 IEPs up to over 200 now. We're at 215. So our special ed enrollment at the high school, the caseload is much larger, and we need another special education teacher. That almost falls into the category of a bill, because the IEPs are legal mandates that we have to service. And the other piece that we identified as a need was, again, in the nursing world, as was mentioned earlier, we have 1 nurse at each school, well beyond the recommended limits of student to nurse staff. What we're looking at doing is adding some part-time nursing positions to the schools. In total, it would be the equivalent of 2 full-time equivalent positions, but it'd be more like, 5 part-time positions spread across the schools that are out of compliance with the suggested norms, to try to get some more nursing support. As I'm sure many of you have heard, Chair Varela mentioned many times, the lunchtime at an elementary school is sort of like a MASH unit. So we do need to get some more support in there. So those were the 5 priorities that were identified: 2 nursing, high school SPED, middle school guidance, elementary reading, as priorities for next year. To be frank, next year's budget does not look good at the state level, of federal level, or anywhere. But it is important to put forward what we think the needs are. I mean, as we did last spring and didn't get them. Coming into the fall town meeting, where a little more money is available, we're able to say that we asked for these other positions last year, and we're asking for them next week. We need to put it on the table that these are necessary. And, we will see how the money plays out in the spring, or rather, I will say, Amy Dexter will see how the money plays out in the spring on behalf of the school system, as she steps into this. And after hearing the last couple hours, I hope she doesn't reconsider on us here. But so the motion that we would ask for from the school committee is to endorse a request for a rollover level service budget of, let me just get the exact number here, $54,905,900, and for a needs-based budget, if you will, of $55,246,400, and that those would be presented to the warrant committee for consideration of the town's fiscal 22 budget.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. Oh, yes. Okay. I think Member Everhart, I saw your hand first.
Sure. I just want to thank the Finance Subcommittee for all your hard work on putting forth the budget, especially in these times where we don't really know what things are going to look like in a couple of weeks, never mind next September, and for the careful considerations that you're giving towards the needs that are going to arise from the reduced in-person learning and from all that's happened over the last, well, not quite a year yet. And, I fully support all these efforts. And I hope that as a community, we will advocate for more money from the Commonwealth, from our legislative. I mean, as Dr. Donahue said, this is a real catastrophe, and it's going to take a lot of effort, combined efforts from a lot of people. And as Chair Varela will often tell you, it's all about the money. And we're going to need more support from the Commonwealth in order to be able to meet the needs that we're going to be facing for our students. And And so I appreciate all your efforts, and I fully support moving forward with what we need for our district and for our students who are at the center of everything that we do.
I agree. Thank you. Dr. Donahue?
Thank you. Yeah, I would second those comments. And you know, public sector budgeting is hard, and I think one of the things that we're going to need to wait and see is, you know, once we are able to get some real assessment data in the spring, and we're going to be able to look backwards and see what the what our district-wide achievement gap is relative to where we expected, you know, were a year before, and then start thinking about how we're going to remedy that. And so, you know, I think a lot of this budget is sort of doing two things. We're starting that triage process, but we're also addressing some of the structural underlying needs that we have as a district that are not going to go away and are not necessarily COVID related. And, you know, to some extent, I would, you know, you want to sort of be able to plug that hole or fix that dam that you're anticipating will be there. But I think we really have an obligation in terms of being responsible fiscal stewards of the district, looking out for those long-term structural needs that we have. And, you know, just like you don't rob Peter to pay Paul, and you try not to use capital money to pay operational expenses or one-time money to pay recurring expenses. You know, we really have to be, and I think we are, be responsible in how we're budgeting and the FTEs that we're looking for, and where we're looking to plug them in, trying to manage all of those competing needs, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that, you know, going forward, these two reading specialists that we're asking for now may well multiply with the needs that we're going to see. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge going forward, but I'm glad you brought that up. So we've been discussing other thoughts, other comments. Okay, so I'd like to, I already made the motion. So all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Before I move on to the vendor warrant, I just want to echo the sentiments of several people tonight. And I'm going to see Dr. Pavlicek once again, or maybe multiple times before he officially retires, at the next finance meeting and when I sign the vendor warrants and so forth. But I wanted to take this opportunity to once again say publicly how much I will miss him, both personally and as chair of the finance committee. Whatever I've been able to grasp about finance is totally due to the man on the screen there with Glenn Pavlicek under his picture. And I didn't even know what Linda Lee had said, that you've been part of budgets for more than 20 years in town. And that's, it shouldn't be surprising to me because you know everything about them. And you are the calm in my storm of anxiety. And you're going to be sad that I have your cell phone number. I do know that we're going to be in the very capable hands of Amy Dexter, and that brings me great comfort. But I really do, in all seriousness, want to thank you for your kindness, your compassion. You're always looking to put the students first, and your ability to explain something to a relative newcomer to the field without making me feel like an idiot. So I truly, completely appreciate that. And we're all gonna really miss you, Glenn. So I'd like to make a motion to approve vendor warrant number 22, payable December 3rd in the amount of $504,872.61. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Second.
And seconded by Chair Varela. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much. And the final thing on the agenda is the added item D, and that is the fiscal year 21 budget, which Chair Varela is going to give us an update on.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this, as Superintendent Pavlicek made mention of, this Monday night, we are having a special town meeting to revote our fiscal 21, this year, this ending year, school year, budget. What we voted on, what ended up to be spring town meeting, which was in the summer because of COVID, as I keep on talking about, was really kind of a fake budget. It was like a temporary estimated budget because all of the asks from the various departments, including ours, that was initially approved pre-COVID, were asked by the town to step back on because of the uncertainty of where we would be and what COVID would bring financially to the town. So the 6 positions that are in the article, that are in our budget line article, to be voted on December 7th, on Monday, which is what we voted on and approved at our last school committee meeting 2 weeks ago. Again, our 6 positions, they are a reading specialist, as Dr. Pavlicek just mentioned, 2 technology positions, 1 a teacher, 1 a technology support person, a guidance counselor, and a world language counselor at the middle school. So these were positions that were approved for the 2020-21 school year pre-COVID. And now that the budget has turned out to be okay, that we do have the funding to put them back in place for the second half of the year. We were brought into, there's $180,000 on a line item article for that. We had a preparatory meeting for town meeting with moderator Bob Hiss this morning, to just go over the rules and how we will be executing the meeting. And he made mention to myself and superintendent that there's been a town meeting member who's already made a motion to ask that our line item for those 6 positions be removed from that article. And because this person's a town meeting member, Moderator Hiss explained to us that they have the legal right to ask that, and it's going to be debated. It would need a second and be debated on the floor of town meeting. So for all of those parents and guardians who are on the phone, on the streaming or on the phone, listening and watching this tonight, I strongly advocate that you call your town meeting members, figure out what precinct you belong in, and you can go to town hall and reach out to them via phone or email. And I strongly urge and ask you for them to advocate that those 6 positions stay in, and that we get those positions up and running in January. I just don't understand why anybody would want, in an over-enrolled environment, you heard the numbers that Superintendent Jed spoke about, that we are over-enrolled at every single elementary school, except for Tucker, by over 100 students, 120, 140, another 130, and 60 at Tucker. And our class sizes in a pre-COVID world are extremely high at the middle and at the high school. And we need these 6 positions desperately. So I strongly am asking and urging all parents and guardians, if you're watching this meeting between now and Monday night, please reach out to your precinct town meeting members and urge them to support this budget, which has been very well vetted by the warrant committee, which is our finance committee in town, and our select board, as well as us, and approved by all. So I just want to make that announcement that is on the floor of town meeting to happen. It's to much dismay to hear that when I went into that meeting this morning. Much dismay. That if you have parents who are advocating for more in-person learning, and then you want another town meeting member to say that those 6 positions shouldn't be funded, I personally find disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to health and wellness.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn it over to Member White.
Thank you. We met on November 20th. Jenny Beliveau, who is a school adjustment counselor at the high school. I think, does she work at the high school, James, or is she at the middle school? Oh, sorry.
High school.
She's at the high school. Okay, I wasn't 100% sure. She presented the results of a parent survey. This parent survey was put together by the wellness committee of the Return to School Task Force, and we worked on it in the summer. It was sent out in late August. Focus was to get parents' input as to their impressions of the social and emotional well-being of their students during the remote learning period of the spring, as well as the how the kids were feeling as they were getting ready to return to school in either the hybrid or remote options. A total of 1,253 responses were received, and several of the questions that were posed were asking parents about their peer relationships, concerns about their children's emotional well-being, the availability of the mental health services if the children needed them, family circumstances having to do with housing, jobs, their health and nutrition, substance abuse concerns. And there was a discussion within the committee of the results of the survey. The next steps of this, of the adjustment councils, was to send out a survey for middle school students and high school students to check on them and their concerns. Some of the discussion we had was about parents' response to the data collection. The data collection asked questions about gender and race, and there was some comments from parents that did not maybe understand or did not really support the questions about that. And there was a discussion of how different populations are impacted differently by this pandemic. Then we talked a little bit about last year's successful parent series that was done in the high school auditorium on a monthly basis, and the need to figure out a way to do that kind of a parents series again in this COVID environment. And the SEL task force is looking into companies that provide K through 12 surveys. Then Laurie Stillman gave a brief update on Milton Substance Abuse Coalition. They started recently, the restaurants and some of the businesses in town started a sticker shock program, they call it. And those are the little red stickers that'll be on your takeout orders that say, don't serve alcohol to minors. The coalition is promoting the concept of a trauma-informed community with the Center for Disease Control. The Milton Clergy Association is sponsoring a film called Gateway, either in January or February, and this film discusses addiction to opiates, and after the film, there'll be a professional facilitator to lead the discussion. The Mass Department of Public Health will probably offer a shortened version of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey this school year. Milton Youth Advocates for Change, which is the new group that was formed last summer, have been exploring ways to make Milton a better place for social justice. The students want to promote youth mental health. They want to explore the strong correlation between racism and trauma, because racism
lost volume. Betty, we lost volume.
Yeah.
How physical education is being done during this COVID period. And then Caroline Kinsella reported that Milton, this was again, our meeting was November 20th. So this is kind of an interesting statistic. So on November 20th, Caroline was reporting that Milton was averaging about 10 positive COVID cases a day. And many of the cases were individuals in their 40s and 50s, which are often the parents of this college students coming home for the holiday break. But the interesting thing is Ada showed us a link that the Milton Public Health is using. And as of yesterday, they had 21 positive cases. So it's interesting how quickly the data is changing and how it's escalating the numbers of COVID that the public health department is seeing. And our next meeting is on the 17th of December. I'm done.
Thank you. Very thorough. Next is a report out on school building committee. And I assume I'm going to Member Rose Marin for that.
Yep, that's me. Thank you. Well, our new chair of the school building committee is Sean O'Rourke. He is stepping in for Carrie Hurley, who will remain as a member of the school building committee, but is having difficulty making a time available between COVID and a full-time job and 3 kids and chairing this committee. So she's stepping away but remaining a member. And Sean is doing a wonderful job already as chair of the committee. He will be providing an update at town meeting on Monday evening. A couple of the highlights of what has been going on is that we have received the updated NESDEC projections and enrollment numbers. And as we've been talking about, the numbers for this year really represent an anomaly, being that because of the pandemic and the drop in particularly at the elementary level enrollment. The high school, I think, is actually up. But the elementary has gone down this year, and most noticeably at the kindergarten level, where families have chosen to keep their kids out and have them in private parochial or homeschooling for the year. NESDEC is going to do a second round of enrollment projections sometime in 2021, early 2021. And at that time, we're going to be in touch with them because their projections are based on that dip in enrollment, which from our understanding of where those kids are in town, we're expecting return to those children back to the schools once we're open after COVID, and that our enrollment numbers will continue to rise as have been projected last year. Nevertheless, despite that a small drop in enrollment, we are still over capacity from the building capacities that we have right now. So it just gives you a sense of how far over capacity we were before. We've been in touch with the Massachusetts School Building Authority about our application with our statement of interest. It was well received. We're expecting to have a visit from them as part of their due diligence. We are one of 81 school districts who have submitted a statement of interest for this round, and it's a very competitive process. So we are just going to have to wait and see. We don't know who else is applying, how much they're asking for, how much money is available, but a lot of that will be figured out in the coming months. We're just informed today that we will not hear a result on that until spring to early summer of 2021, which was a little surprising. It's further delayed than we thought it might be, but still, the next round is the next phase of the school building authority process is the eligibility phase. And during that phase, we will need to request funding for the following phase for a feasibility study. And we will be preemptively submitting an article for the May town meeting in anticipation of acceptance of our application by a school building authority. And we'll have more information on that as time goes on. We're continuing to talk about site and haven't come to any conclusions yet, but we're still looking at a site that will meet the needs of a new elementary school, which would be somewhere around 4 to 5 acres minimum. And that's pretty much it for school building committee.
Great. Thanks so much, Rita. Moving on to approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes to approve that Maureen Sini sent out to all of us. I hope everyone had a chance to review it. It's for the November 4th, 2020 meeting. I'm going to make a to approve them. Could I have a second?
Second.
Does anyone have any changes, edits? If not, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. Next meeting agenda items. So we'll be meeting on the 17th. I'm going to invite back our student advisory committee members to attend, and if they want to speak at the 17th, the meeting on the 17th. We should have a report out on survey results at that meeting. Dr. Donahue, do you think that we will have a policy meeting between then to report out on, or should we move that to January?
We'll have a facilities meeting next week, and okay. If you feel we can probably squeeze in a policy meeting, if you.
All right, if squeeze it in, we'll do it. If not, push it to January. But we'll at least have the student advisory committee, the survey results reported out, a facilities update, possible policy update. We'll have finance as usual. And I think that's about it. If anything else comes up.
Chair, may I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering about I know that this is going to sound crazy, but registration for next year. And I'm wondering about when those information sessions will happen for families for kindergarten for next year, first grade for next year, and like what is the timeline district-wide for that? Because I know that this is usually the time when we start to think about it, and then we have those meetings in January.
Do you want to report out on that at the next
I'm just
meeting,
curious. I just was curious as to if there was going to be, if we were going to follow a similar timeline, or if there was going to be a delay in that, and just conversations with community members about kindergarten registration for next year and first grade, and how all of those things might be impacted by the current situations that we're in.
Superintendent Jeff?
Yeah, so we actually had a meeting about that Monday, but we actually talked about it prior to Monday. So there have been some enhancements in terms of our registration process, and then we're looking at trying to get the hard numbers and project not only for the number of students, but also staffing that we may need in trying to figure out how many students are going to come back. We just got the numbers from last February when folks had to do the registration, because that was probably a true indication of how many students we were going to have. So we do have a date of January 7th when we may be putting out relatively soon for what are the registrations, and then the second one later a few weeks after. So, but that information will be coming out soon.
Okay, great. So, all right, so with that, I'm going to make to move into executive session. We have approval of executive session minutes that we have to deal with. So I'm going to make a motion to enter into executive session for the approval of the minutes and not to return to open session, and to adjourn directly from executive session. I need a second on that.
Second.
Second, Dr. Craighead. The roll call vote. Member Craighead.
Yes.
Member White,
Yes.
Member Aaron,
Yes.
Member Everhart,
Yes.
Member Donahue, Member Varela, yes. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Be safe.